All right, Chaz, let's get right to it. The Reds have reached 500, and after the series in Miami against the Marlins, have continued to hover around 500 for the season. So finish this sentence for me. 500 for this Reds team at this point in the season feels like what?
Inconsistent, and that kind of feels like the theme of the year. There's the version of the Reds team that scores sometimes 24, sometimes like 7 runs. And then there's the version of the Reds team that gets out-pitched or out-game planned or out-executed in the field. And it's early, and I think we played this soundbite a couple days ago. Chris Valeka, the hitting coach, talking about some changes on the hitting side that you can't just snap your fingers, that take some time to
Right.
establish. Maybe you're seeing that with the team as a whole, but definitely you look at like 5 or 7 games right now is, man, the Reds let that one get away. So maybe that luck will skew in their favor. You hear very smart baseball people make that point, but definitely some missed opportunities.
Two takeaways from the Marlins series. Miami may be a little bit better than some people think. Uh, Young players, inexperienced players, they played hard. The Reds are clearly more talented and more experienced, but you saw in the second game, especially in Miami, the team that plays cleaner baseball has a pretty good chance to win, which the Marlins did in taking the first 2 games of that series and winning the series 2-1. Welcome to Power Stacks with Giesenslaw and Goldsmith as we take a look at Chuck from the world headquarters of Charlie's Chalkboard. No collared shirt today. Kind of feels like, the sun's out outside. You let your hair down a little bit and relax.
Yes, me with the same same haircut for my entire life, letting my hair down. No, this is a Patagonia branded shirt. This is a nice, not a nice shirt, but a
I
fine
didn't
shirt.
say that it wasn't a nice shirt, and hair is always a sensitive subject with me, so don't come at me with you having the same hair your entire life. Coming up on the show today, early returns on a couple of Reds off-season editions. We've got that. Also, Three's Company or Three's a Crowd when it comes to the Reds catchers. That topic on the way. And, with the Bengals about to be on the clock for the draft, we put Chaz on the clock today with our first ever, I don't know what to call it, maybe a crossover comparison. We're going to draw some comparisons between the NFL draft and what that event is in your Cincinnati Reds. So that's coming up on the show today. We are proud members, as always, of the Growler Podcast Network. Let me start you with this, Chaz. A 10th round pick, 5 major league teams, 34 years old at the moment. He has worn numerous minor league uniforms, but the player I just described in 7 years has barely a season and a half worth of major league games. We're talking about Austin Wynns. And why are we talking about Austin Wynns? Given that resume and that track record, it's because of what Austin Wynns has done in an unexpected opportunity for this Reds team this season, playing behind Jose Trevino. Wynns has had the games of his life and the games of his career from Baltimore to the series in Miami.
It's cool to see someone like this have a moment because kind of wins his whole career, wins his whole experience, the experience of pretty much every number 3 catcher, which is where he's been on depth charts for most of his career. It's by default a guy behind the scenes, a guy never in the spotlight. And that's kind of how Wins felt kind of when I got to know him. It was in spring training in 2024. I would always show up early. I want to make sure I'm there for when the clubhouse opens in case there's something newsy that happens or something like that. And the only player who beat me to the facility every day was Austin Wynns. And he didn't just beat me. He was wrapping up his workout by the time that I was walking into the media tent. And the workout area and the media tent are right next to each other. So we'd chat. I'd finish my coffee. He'd be done with his workout. And at first my impression was, man, this is one of the more serious, quiet, reserved players that I'm going to be covering. But then he opened up. He talked about his experiences. He talked about pitching. This guy really gets it. And then, over the last 2 years, especially, you've seen kind of the humor and the lighthearted nature show up in a lot of the fun interviews and a lot of the fun comments that he has. you can go through his career, and there are some fascinating twists and turns, even just in Cincinnati, about opportunities and injuries and developing trust with pitchers. And my favorite win story is his relationship with Reds prospect Connor Phillips. But just in general, all this kind of stuff. It's just cool to see a guy who's grinded and by default is never going to be in the spotlight actually be in the spotlight for this time.
He's a 10th round pick of the Orioles, so the fact that he had that big series in Baltimore with the 6-hit, 6 RBI game, I mean, that's something he can take with him the rest of his life, no matter how he feels about the organization. He spent some time there, they brought him up, and he had that kind of a game. Continued to play well, certainly had some big moments in game 3 of the Miami series, caught Brady Singer's 4th win on Wednesday afternoon, but as you look at and you listen to right now what Terry Francona, even post-game on Wednesday, said about his catching tandem, Jose Trevino and Austin Wynns, he said, "Look, we want Tyler Stevenson back, don't get me wrong. We thought that was gonna be something really terrible that you have to deal with and uh, try to mask early in the season until Stevenson comes back." Trevino and Wynns have been so good that it's turned into a really good story for the Reds while they wait for Stevenson. So with Stevenson having started his rehab stretch with the bats, the question is coming, 3 catchers. Would the Reds even consider carrying 3 catchers given how well the other 2 have played, or are there some tough decisions that are gonna be made right away? How do you feel about that?
So I'll start with this. Like I just mentioned, my experience talking with Austin Wynns, I've always been a kind of a big fan of his game, viewing him as one of the best 60 or so catchers in baseball. And hey, that is a big league catcher who just didn't get an opportunity for a Reds team that was already invested in that position with big league guaranteed deals ahead of him. Looking forward, projecting forward, I'm reminded of the last time the Reds had 3 catchers, 2023. And remember, going into that season, David Bell planned every day who was going to catch when, and Stevenson was going to DH and play first more than he was going to catch. David abandoned that plan a week into the season, maybe 2 weeks into the season. And what ended up happening is, and this wasn't David's fault. David was doing the best thing to win with the roster he had, but it ended up being pretty unfair to Kurt Casale. Casale ended up being the true number 3 because Maley was just much better than him. And Casale would go a week, 2 weeks without playing. There just weren't ways to get him in the game. He went on the IL, and if he had come back from the IL, he probably just would have been designated for assignments. Is that the best thing to do for a catcher who in Austin Wynns is playing the best baseball of his life and probably would have an opportunity, if he were in a regular tandem for over the course of an entire season, to build on that, to prove something, to get a guaranteed contract heading into 2026 in a way that he might not have completely earned yet, being the small sample size that it's been so far in 2025. So, what I know is if you have 3 catchers, no matter what, it's going to be unfair to somebody. Wins, who still hasn't gotten a single at bat chipped away from Jose Trevino, it's still 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. Wins would probably be that odd man out. And then if you're trying to get Wins an extra start or 2, then Stevenson's the odd man out, and Stevenson's your franchise catcher. And I don't want to mess with that for a guy who, even in a best case scenario, in Austin Wins, there's no long term future here for him with the Reds, with what they have invested in the catching position. So it's probably best for everyone to stick with 2, but you know, all you can do is make it as tough a decision as possible. And Wins is proving again that he is a major league catcher.
Yeah, if nothing else, the Reds have been given the luxury of patience with Tyler Stevenson.
Great.
Listen,
Yes.
he's right back. First off, he hasn't felt like he would have to rush back. As he plays these games, if they thought he needed 5 games but they really needed him here and it was only 1 or 2 games, I think now you have that feeling where you can be patient and hopefully get Stevenson back 100% to where he would need to be. But yeah, tough decisions. But what a story it's been so far. Man, he's had some moments. Guys love him. And they're all kind of buzzing right now about the way this catching tandem has performed for the Reds so far this season. Early in the year, and if you look at the numbers as a whole for the Reds pitching staff, it continues to be a good story for this team. But early in the year, you had starters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that were deep into games. There was a lot of talk about the 6th and 7th inning. That's not going to happen every time out for each and every person. So as you've watched this rotation go through 4 or 5 times now, And Brady Singer, by the way, as of the Miami series, is tied for the major league lead in wins with his 4-0 record on the season. You had the interruption with Lodolo being gone, Carson Spires being in, the game that kind of set the bullpen back after Hunter Green had his short start. Where's the staff right now in terms of maybe getting back on track and maximizing the roles that the starters and the bullpen guys all have?
I think Hunter Green is showing what he is, and the Baltimore game will just be a blip on the radar. Nick Lodolo and his ability to grind this year has been a really positive sign of growth, and he's figuring out ways to pitch even when his strikeout numbers are down, and he's looking like a top half of the rotation guy. Martinez is going to be just fine, a lot to build on from his most recent outing. Abbott looks just much better than I expected, and that's been really positive. And then Singer is a guy he's not an innings eater. There's really some stuff behind that that's leading to generating more swing and miss. It's almost that we know what this Reds team is overall based on what you end up getting out of the starting pitching staff. Again, you're not going to go six every time, but when they do get six, that kind of on the front end limits the burden they have to put on the bullpen. Under the radar theme has been: are they using Pagan, Santi, and Ashcraft? Are they showing a couple signs of fatigue here or there where they have to go, a lot of games in a short stretch? Well, if you have a starter going 6 plus, that saves that. And then the defense ties into this too, because there have been a number of games where the starter hasn't gone into the six because there have been missed plays in the field. So when they're playing clean, when the starter's protecting the bullpen by pitching deep into the game, that's when this Red team is really, really tough to beat. If they're not doing those things, that's where some weaknesses get exposed.
Yeah, and we talked about clean baseball and those plays you're talking about. We saw examples of some of that in the second game of the Miami series in the seventh inning. Graham Ashcraft had an unfortunate attempt to make a throw at first base that ended up costing the Reds a little bit. That wasn't the only mistake in that inning. And I think you just keep going back to this team was so focused and talked a lot about openly about playing clean baseball in the field, on the bases, everything that they can. And I believe they're gonna get past some of these things. I don't know where that's coming from right now for me, but I believe they're gonna get past some of those things. And all of this to me still feels like with the Reds, as we said, hovering around 500, it all still feels like a get to know yourself phase of the season with a new manager and some new guys and some new ways of doing things. It feels like it's gonna settle in at some point. Maybe that's just me.
I feel like the biggest adjustment there's been with the running game. Like, I really still think they're figuring out, like, all right, when do you want to run? What situations? What pitchers do you want to run against? How aggressive do you want to be? How selective do you want to be? I feel like they're still very much figuring out their identity there. And ideally, you can start to tap into more of that speed as you go on. But they are planning to be a more deliberate, patient, decisive running team as opposed to run like they did last season. And then the defense, like, what did Friedel miss the cutoff man on Tuesday? Friedel's fine. Friedel's a very heads up
Right,
player. Fraley's
right.
a very heads up. Most of these, and there are a couple exceptions who I won't name who have more negative examples than you'd want, but overall, I do believe in the heads up baseball of this team collectively. And, now it's in the adjustment process, and whether or not that takes 1 month or three, well, that will decide whether or not the Reds make the playoffs this year. So let's sit back and see how quickly they're able to do this.
It's only got 5 months left. Hey, one more thing about that before we move on when you talk about this team running, and they haven't been in terms of stolen bases. It's not what it was, the pace or the green light that everybody had last year, but we're reminded on Wednesday in the game against the Marlins, Elly De La Cruz leads off the 8th inning with a single, steals second, winds up on third base, and then makes that dash for the plate and that headfirst slide that got the Reds some of those or an insurance run late in that game, and he may have been out. Otto Lopez at second base made about the best defensive play and the best throw you can make in that situation, but I was reminded of just the pressure that you can put on a defense with Elly De La Cruz doing that. He broke for the plate. He scored that run. That felt familiar in terms of De La Cruz being dangerous and putting pressure on teams that way.
Ellie has the quietest 10 steals in 25 games that you
Right.
could possibly imagine. That's like a
Exactly.
65 steal pace. Um, I think a huge thing in this Miami series was the inconsistency of the Marlins catchers. and that kind of opened some
Right.
opportunities for the Reds to start to run more aggressively. I believe Colorado's catchers aren't strongest as well. St. Louis should be better coming up. So, like, maybe that's a series where they wouldn't run as much. In the past, it'd just be, you're going to run this series, you're going to run the next series, you're going to run the series after that. And I can't stress enough, that is a big, significant difference that you're seeing the philosophy evolve with the Reds this year. Now, I looked up the stat last Friday. I don't have the updated stat. My apologies. But as of last Friday, the Reds did rank last in Fangraph's base running metric in all baseball. They were the least valuable base running team in the league.
Hmm.
You can feel that improve, could feel that improve over the course of the Miami series in particular. Again, taking advantage of the catcher, but definitely some work to grow there about how to maximize the speed on this team.
All right, let's jump into Charlie's notebook right now. And a topic that has been a topic since the offseason was the Reds' offseason to-do list in getting an outfield bat or two, middle of the order type bat or two. And the Reds went out and they took a look and they acquired both Austin Hayes, whom we've talked about quite a bit, the prove it deal that he's on, and certainly he's continues to play very well in that role. And then Gavin Lux also um, comes over, and what the Reds have seen, Lux didn't have a slow start to the season by any stretch, but recently, as of the end of the Miami series, a 9-game hitting streak, finally popped that first home run. What have you seen in Lux in terms of what was expected, and maybe now that he's started to get a little bit of a feel for himself and a little bit of a groove into this season?
My criticism for the Reds front office over the last several years has been the big position player investments they've made haven't panned out to the extent that they needed. And of course, they have limitations, because they are a small market team. They don't want to be aggressive trading from the farm system. I get that. Because they're a small market team, they're not going to be aggressive in free agency. Sure, to an extent, I understand that. But kind of my thing had been just go out and find players you like and seek out opportunistic guys to not quite buy low on, but go get somebody. And Gavin Lux was a perfect example of that. If I did put together a very extensive list of potential trade targets the Reds could go out and get this offseason. I went deep into the numbers. Gavin Lux wasn't on the list because I wasn't expecting him to be available. The Reds were monitoring the situation. They were on top of it. When the Dodgers signed the guy, Hyson Kim, to replace Lux, they got Lux, and it's like, where's he going to play? The under-discussed thing has been Lux hasn't, to my memory, I mean, he hasn't made a single mistake in third or in left. He's playing fundamentally sound baseball. And that's been a huge deal. But then offensively, man, he just sees the ball very, very well. It is almost like a Jonathan India style approach.
Hmm.
I really like just the feel and the comfort of Lux as a hitter. I talked to Lux. I said, "Hey, Gavin, you must be seeing the ball pretty well right now." And here's Gavin Lux talking about how he's feeling.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing the ball pretty good. I still think, early on I'm missing some pitches to hit that, I'd like to end the at bat there and not have to go to a 3-2 count every at bat. But I think just being selective on what I know I can do damage on it and, get the 2 strikes, I feel comfortable. Hitting with 2 strikes, I don't mind it. So it's as soon as I get the 2 strikes, just trying to grind guys out. Like the throws, maybe such didn't get mad. So yeah, I feel like I'm seeing a little bit.
That's actually exactly what the Reds signed Jeimer Candelario to do, and we'll talk about Jeimer more in a minute. But that polish and comfort in uncomfortable situations and the expectability isn't a word, but the expecting exactly what you're going to get from an at bat quality standpoint and the stress that can put on pitchers with the kind of IQ that only a veteran, and Gavin is a veteran, can bring to the table. Again, that's what they signed Candelario to do. We'll talk about him, but that has just been a massive contribution from Gavin Lux.
And the he's another person that they've added to the clubhouse with that, he's been there. He's done that. He's won. He's been in the big spotlight, in the big games, on a team with stars, and he has won. And I think everyone talks continually about the clubhouse, how this group has come together, kind of the mix. It feels like the mix is, for whatever attempt they made at that, to stock this team with some veterans who'd won, with the young guys who are still learning, with some emerging superstars. It feels like that's worked so far, and Gavin Lux has been a big part of that. But you obviously bring up one of the other talking points for the Reds as you look at a team that right now, without Christian Encarnacion Strand, is really the only guy that's out right now outside of Stevenson that they, and they didn't start the season with Stevenson. Playing time, we mentioned Noelvi Marte on the last show, and I think Terry Francona continues to show right now a little bit of I think he wants to see Marte succeed. He wants everybody to succeed, but I think he wants to see Marte take this opportunity and run with it. Marte mentioned his confidence a lot after the game that he had in Baltimore and in Miami. That's good. But Terry Francona, as you've said, has also preached patience for a lot of players. Is there is the patience with a certain player, Jeimer Candelario, is there a limit to that, or based on his track record last season and the similarities, at least in terms of the slow start, is that patience going to be extended with how he has not come up at the plate yet and kind of found the stroke that he's had?
Right now, there are 2 spots in the lineup for Candelario, for Spencer Steer, and for Noelvi Marte, and they've been rotating in and out. They've kind of been mixing and matching there. Quick tangent, Noelvi Marte, we all know how impressive and comfortable and confident he looks at the plate. What a massive growth and improvement and development there, taking advantage of his offseason.
Mhm.
He's got to play cleaner baseball. He can't get thrown out at third.
Yep.
His throws from third to second, that's been a thing, and it's showing up again. All right, now back to Jeimer. Let's put all these pieces tie together. Jeimer Candelario was off to a very slow start last year. He is one of the most feel-oriented hitters that I've ever been around, and honestly, a lot of people around baseball have told me very similar things. And what you're seeing right now is a guy who's kind of tinkering in the hood, looking for what's going to be comfortable. He typically has been an even platoon split guy. He's actually been much, much better versus left-handed pitching this season, which is a sign that maybe there are some differences in what Candelario is this year. Obviously, that's sure it's a positive versus left-handed pitching, but it's a negative versus right-handed pitching. So the big question is, do you let Candy settle in? Last year he settled in and he was truly one of their best hitters between May, June, and July. Do you let him settle in, or are you more aggressive looking at stuff? That's the question that I posed to Reds hitting coach Chris Valleca.
We're definitely looking at stuff. I think there's stuff with him that, we got to work through some bat speed stuff. I think we need to make him more aggressive early in the counts, to pitches he wants to handle rather than, trying to gas or ambush like we've seen, where the weak contact would come from. But overall, he's been in the big leagues for a while. It's tough to get out to a slower start like he had, but somebody that's played in the big leagues this long, like, I'm not worried or overly worried about it. We look up in October, hopefully those numbers are where they need to be. We're playing a long game. Right.
So Jeimer was on pace for 29 homers last season before his season-ending injury. But 2 things there from Valleca that do show that there are differences with the concerning nature of the April we're seeing now from him. The word guessing from a pitch selection and overall professional at-bat standpoint. And then specifically bring up the bat speed. I mean, this is a guy in Jeimer who has got to be an aggressive drive the ball. He's spoken about it. He said, I got to be driving the ball. And it takes a vindication in your swing to be able to do that. Getting off that best swing with the best pitch identification of ones you want to take advantage of. I mean, that's the process that a veteran hitter's got to have figured out. But Jeimer's more of a field hitter. Now, it sounds like still they're going to give him opportunity, but it's certainly a tough stretch for Jeimer Candelario.
Yeah, and with Spencer Steer right now playing first, certainly hoping to continue to progress with how he feels. When Steer is not at first, Candelario plays first, and so there's kind of that whole thing with each of those 2 players as well. Circling back for just a moment to pitching, I wanted to ask you about Wade Miley on the injured players right now that are out working. We mentioned Stevenson and Sam Maul, who are back to work with the Louisville Bats. Wade Miley makes his first game action back with
Don't read the
Dayton.
stat line.
No. That's the point. With Dayton coming off Tommy John. Yeah, it was his first game back. So I'm not talking about that. But what is the plan? What is the hope? And maybe what does Miley expect? And what do the Reds hope to get out of this as you watch Miley work his way back from Tommy John?
So Miley wasn't going to just sign anywhere. There was a very, very, very small list of places he was comfortable with. Milwaukee went in another direction. He loved his time in Cincinnati. They linked up there, knowing where Miley was coming back from his Tommy John surgery, 1, and 2, where the Reds were at from a pitching depth standpoint. And basically, the idea was A, you can never have too much pitching depth. B, by the time Miley is ready to go, maybe in May, they're allowed to extend a rehab assignment
Okay.
longer than the 30-day rule when you're a pitcher coming back from Tommy John surgery. So that gives them a little flexibility. But I mean, these things change so quickly from a pitching depth standpoint. Like 1 second you've got Carson Spires. Now Carson Spires isn't throwing for 6 weeks. So that changes things. By the time the Reds get to May, I would bet there would be some sort of use or interest or need for Wade Miley in some type of role, just because injuries happen. Now, if they don't happen, I'm sure I know for a fact the Reds would do right by Miley. Um, Probably wouldn't have a slot in the rotation right now as it stands, but let's see where you're at in May. Until then, biggest concern in the whole organization is starting pitching depth. I mean, I like Chase Petty as much as the next guy, but he's 21 years old and has like a month's worth or 4 weeks worth of AAA starts under his belt. The first few of which, we're up and down. And again, I think Petty will make an impact in the big leagues this year, but I'd like to see him, ideally, you'd like to see any pitcher at that stage of his career get a bit more time to develop in AAA. Let's see if I can remember the names of the other guys in the Reds AAA rotation. Aaron Wilkinson, who was in a big league camp, kind of a journeyman guy. Drew Parrish, another journeyman. I guess next up, Randy Wynn. We saw the other day the definition of a journeyman guy. So the Reds' starting pitching depth is much weaker. There are Julian Aguiar and Brandon Williamson shaped holes in the Louisville Bats depth chart.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're worried about the depth. And if you get up Miley has depth, who would be available kind of for that bridge stretch there early in the summer, that does help you feel more comfortable. But of course, first, let's see how Miley's doing and give him the time he needs.
Give him the time he needs, and good health for the Reds rotation would certainly help in that. And hopefully Carson Spires, hopefully that's not a long-term deal either, because that certainly provides you more options, as we have seen. I want to save some time for this because I'm excited about this next segment. Very excited because I know how much time you and the godfather of the Growler podcast empire, Paul Daner Jr., spend on draft preparation for the NFL. It is, and it's so hard to put into words why the NFL draft has become what it is by comparison to the other major sports. What is it about the draft that captures our attention the way that it does?
I think it's the exact same itch that had us having the conversation. Oh, when Stevenson comes back, what are the Reds going to do from a 3-catcher perspective? Like, there is the passion for team building, especially in like situations that are very obvious to have one stance versus the other. Like, you can make both sides of the argument, and you can do that with baseball, 26-man roster decisions. And you can make that with the draft. Like, oh, you got to get this guy, you got to get that guy, you got to improve this, you got to improve that. And I love the idea too of, all right, like you have all these scouting reports and players you watch and write reports on, and man, like you'll have the 5'10" defensive tackle. It's like, wow, that's interesting. That's weird. And you'll have the 6'6" running back, and you're like, wow, that's crazy. And so you're introduced to all these archetypes and molds of players, and we all feel like we have the eye that can see something. And I think there's something beautiful in that we all kind of take a shot.
I like it. When I was in Texas, I used to love just Texas high school football recruiting. That was when it was a different game many years ago, and so I could get into the weeds a little bit on that. But the draft is an entirely different animal. So I know you have probably multiple spreadsheets and things for the draft, right? That's
one. I've one big one. It is a very big,
but it's a large document.
I mean, it's about high.
Okay.
Color coded, lots of different. So it's color coded means something, bold means something, italics means something, underline means something, all caps means something. And if you are bold, underline, italics, all caps, you should be a Bengal.
I love this. So we wanted to tap into this somehow. And the idea was somehow to tie the fun of the NFL draft that's coming up this week with the Reds. And we kicked around a couple of things. And one of the ideas, was let's take some Reds players and see how they might project on some of the measurables or the things that we rate NFL draft prospects on. And your answer right away was, well, it's going to be Ellie De La Cruz 9 out of 10 times. And so that's not very fun. And you're right. Athleticism, speed, burst, all the things you rate NFL draft prospects on, there's a good chance it's gonna be De La Cruz. By the way, it'd be interesting, we've had this conversation about LeBron James, could he play? Where would he play? What kind of wideout would Ellie De La Cruz be in the National Football League? Because, yes, he would test very well, obviously, leading into the draft and into those types of things. But what we came up with is, you're just gonna take a handful of Reds players and draw a comparison to someone that you've studied that you see in the draft. I'm not gonna know who any of these draft guys are. So, let me start you with a
But
Red
but you,
player.
you are gonna grade my takes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll give you a
You'll
grade.
but the explanation and the way it makes sense. I would like a grade on each of these. On
Would we decide on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10?
Let's go. I was gonna make a joke like 20 to 80, like baseball. Let's do that. Let's go. No, 1 to 10.
Okay. 1 to 10 is easy enough. Um, let's start with Blake Dunn. We know that Blake Dunn played a lot of football in his life.
He
His
did.
dad's a football coach, high school football legend in Michigan, Blake Dunn. So, let's kick off this little exercise, and I'm still not convinced how well this is gonna go, but give me an NFL draft prospect comparison for Blake Dunn. First, who is the player? Where is he from? Give me some measurables on this guy.
Bayshall Tutton, running back, Virginia Tech.
Okay, well, I'm glad it's a running back. You already have my comparison attention to Blake Dunn.
So Tutton, what I find interesting, and he's not as much of a guy as he's a Bengals fit, but it's a game based on explosion and jitteriness that's still rounding the corners of the for Tutton. That's between the tackles efficiency. He has the explosive skill set to break one off. You can have him make an immediate impact as a kick returner, but he has to improve his decision making. Right now, the entire skill set is explosiveness combined with effort. He goes east west too much. He's got to get downhill. That's what Blake Dunn is. His game is all explosiveness. He showed elite power in the minor leagues, and obviously he's one of the fastest guys in baseball. But he's learning on the fly in the big leagues, kind of the polish it takes to be a full-time player. Same with Tutton. Tutton would be a kick return RB3 gadget guy in the league right now. Dunn, that's kind of what he is with the Reds, and. But I also think if Dunn played football, he would be Tutton. Like, I think they're the same athlete. They're both like 5'9". I think this honestly was my favorite one. There were a lot of similarities here.
You said jitteriness. Can I use he's got twitchiness? Is twitch a good NFL draft word?
You know what? I think jitteriness and twitch are completely different things. I see twitch in short area, in through contact. Like, I think edge rushers have twitch.
Okay.
I think receivers getting off of press can have twitch. Jitter is, when your feet chop. It's when you're shifty. It's when you're getting around someone who's not latched onto you. That's what I would associate as jitter, which
All right,
Blake
I like
Dunn has both.
I like that. I'm gonna give that a 3.5 on our 1 to 5 scale. I don't wanna set the bar too high out of the
That's
gate, but I like that you drop I like your terminology. You don't know what I'm rating you on here. I'm not just rating you on the comparison. I'm rating you on your delivery, your terminology, your conviction with which you pose these comparisons. So all of that goes into it. We go 3.5. What about Gavin Lux? Who's his comp?
Gavin Lux goes with Carson Schwessinger, linebacker, UCLA, projected second rounder. Terrific Bengals fit. Schwessinger is a guy who, watch him drop back in coverage from the linebacker position in cover two schemes, and there is a smooth, fluid ball tracking style where he translates instincts, anticipation skills, and most importantly, awareness, which is kind of a lost art from a linebacker position. You see a lot of guys who fly downhill who are all about traits, explosiveness, power, oomph, and violence. Schwessinger diagnoses the play. He sifts through blocks. He's able to get through the rubble, and he'll find the football. And that's kind of what Gavin Lux does. He doesn't light up the board with his traits, but there's kind of an old school know-how to him that gives him this reliability, this decision-making perspective and awareness, as well as a versatility, being able to do multiple different things at the plate, be several styles of hitters, and, be several styles of position players as well. So Gavin Lux reminds me a lot of Carson Schwessinger.
Good football IQ.
Oh, well, Lux, or are you talking about Schwessinger, has great football IQ. I don't know Gavin Lux's football IQ.
I
He
know.
does have great baseball IQ.
I just wanted to drop that into the conversation. It just felt right. I don't know. I'm going to give that a 3. So right now we're still 3.5 for the first one and 3 for the second one. Next comp, Austin Hayes. Where do you see him as a comp in this draft? And hopefully it's not a 4th or 5th rounder. You're losing me. I thought we were going to do top 10 guys and somebody I might recognize.
It would be no fun if we were comparing Ellie De La Cruz to Travis Hunter and Hunter Green to Abdul Carter. Come on.
Okay. You're right.
So
What about Austin Hayes?
Now, every Bengals fan will know, and I don't know, you may too know the guy I'm about to name because Al Golden has spent. You don't. I'm sorry. You're fine.
No. Nope.
You're busy with hockey and baseball.
Ask me about the Stanley Cup playoffs right now and who I like.
The Bengals listeners will know Xavier Watts. The Bengals, if you are a Bengals fan, you have mocked Xavier Watts to the Bengals because he was their new defensive coordinator, safety at Notre Dame, and fills the exact skill set the Bengals need at that position. What stands out to me about both of these guys with Hayes and Watts is there is a playmaking, production, power, dynamic, explosive element where just when you see them walk off the bus or walk onto the field, you're like, all right, this is going to be just a heads up, gritty, aware player who is going to find the ball and, hoorah, go get him. But there's actually so much more, again, tool, explosive, raw athleticism, firepower is the word I used in my notes. There's so much more of any of that, and all of that translates into this incredible confidence you see from them. Again, two players who very much play like they're built like an Ellie De La Cruz or Buda Baker, who's a superstar safety. They play like that, even though they're not built like that. And they don't just play like that. They show some of those tools as well, even though it doesn't look to appear that way on paper. Plus, they do have all of the awareness, coach's best friend type of element that you would expect for someone who is a bit undersized. So Austin Hayes, a great addition for the Reds. Xavier Watts, the guy who maybe could come and fix the spine of the Bengals defense.
I just love your passion about this. I mean, you're getting worked up, right? This you get some juice from this, don't you, Chad?
This segment is what it's. The secret is my favorite thing to do is to talk to Bengals people about the Reds and to talk to Reds people about the Bengals, which happens daily in these locker rooms and clubhouses.
Okay.
So I'm bringing this to the air.
I needed to know that as we move forward in our relationship. That's a 3, by the way, on Hayes. I like that too, but your passion is off the charts. Your passion is at a 5 right now. You even had to, for those not watching on YouTube, he had to pick up his microphone at one point because he couldn't see all of his notes, and he wanted to make sure he got it all in. TJ Friedel. I kind of feel like, even without knowing anything about the player you're about to comp, I feel like I know what type of NFL player or football player TJ Friedel would be, but you go ahead.
Not so fast, my friend. The person I'm comparing TJ Friedel to is Aeneas Peebles, defensive tackle, Virginia Tech, 6'1", 288 pounds.
That's not Friedel.
Now they're very different makeups. This comparison doesn't work, but it does. They both have unorthodox skill sets. They're undersized, but they're hyper aggressive at what they do, and they use that hyper aggression to pin their ears back and generate incredible power for two guys that are truly undersized to their position. Like the football cliche, and you could apply this to Peebles, I'm sure draft analysts are doing that, is the feet move like a goose, like they're going a million miles an hour below the surface. And that's what TJ Friedel's game is too. Obviously, you don't have quite the legs churning through contact, but the spirit is a word that comes up with Peebles. The explosiveness out of nowhere that you see, and you're like, where'd that come from? To generate real production. The nonstop energy. And then the ability to translate that from a pass rush, from a power speed defense perspective with Friedel, to turn yourself into someone who plays a premium position instead of just being kind of a gritty role player who tries hard and has some burst, which is what those two guys could be. The ability to, again, use those traits to become a premium style of player on a team in terms of what teams value. That, to me, draws that comparison between Friedel and Peebles.
Back to 3.5 for that one. I like that one. That was a good one. Just because you surprised me with the defensive lineman, right? Defensive lineman?
Yes, defensive tackle.
Defensive tackle. All right. Yeah, you surprised me with that. So back up to 3.5. Let's finish this up with Noel V. Marte.
Noel V. Marte I'm comparing to Smail Mondon, linebacker, Georgia, a projected 3rd rounder.
Okay.
Mondon really is one of the best athletes in this class. What he is the kind of guy I call a chaser. Read, react, go, change of direction, get downhill in the open field. That works sometimes, but you also read scouting reports that go, Mondin needs to works to see things a half beat faster to reach his full potential. Like Mondin breaks on the play, but you'd like to see and really goes once he kind of shoots out of the cannon, which he does, but you'd like to see better anticipation, better recognition, just becoming more complete. And the idea is Mondin's one of the youngest guys in this class. That'll come with time. And he was able to have a ton of success at Georgia just because of the physical, dynamic, athletic traits that are rare. Like Mondin was incredibly productive because of all the things he can't do. Don't worry about the things he can't do, but it is the things he can't do that will determine whether or not he's going to be a consistent starting high end pro as opposed to a role player at the highest level. And to me, that sounds a lot like Noelvi Marte.
That's a 3, but I'm gonna now having heard all what we do 5, having heard
Five.
all 5, I'm gonna tick the Blake Dunn Tutton comparison up just a tick because you said that was your favorite, and I think that was my favorite too. But I was just making some notes. I mean, this was you worked in burst, pen your ears back, jittery, violence, RB3, chaser, get downhill. I mean, you checked a lot of boxes here for draft lingo and draft coverage, so I enjoyed that. In all seriousness, who will the Bengals pick with their first pick?
I'm projecting
First.
I'm projecting Malachi Stark, safety, Georgia. All you need to know is he stepped into a complex scheme as a freshman and immediately was a playmaker at a high level school playing big football. I really want the pick to be Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. I think that would do the most for the defense. I just can't answer how Al Golden changing the scheme and different prototypes and archetypes of players lines up with who Campbell is. Starks can be a stud in any defense. So because I have that certainty, I am projecting Starks.
Before we move on, let's plug Paul Daner and the Growler. That's where you should go for all your draft stuff. You'll see Chaz there and the entire cast of characters that they have. Big shows planned. I saw today there's a big post-draft show on Tuesday after the draft at Nation Kitchen and Bar at the Banks
with director of college scouting Mike Potts. Now, the line on the show had been that it's because like the whole bit is the show starts at like 5 and then go to the Reds game, have a great time. And I said, well, this is me every day, talk to people about the Bengals, go to Nation, get something to eat, and then go watch the Reds. And so that's me every day. But yes, Mike Potts, who he's going to tell the real stories of how the Bengals and why the Bengals picked these guys. So it's always a great show.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, check those guys out. And Chaz, I didn't know how fun this was going to be, how much you were going to get so riled up about this. So that was good. I like that. And we'll all keep an eye on the draft and what the Bengals do specifically. For the Reds, though, they are on to after an off day, which should help a ton. You get everybody, settled back in. The, Singers start on Wednesday, allowed everything to settle back down. And then you have the off day before you start the series against the Rockies. It's a Rockies team that the numbers are not good. Anything can happen in that ballpark. We know that. So you don't look past anybody, but the numbers are not good. You mentioned before that we're also going to see Kyle Farmer and Nick Martini. And
they're two best hitters.
Yeah, Farmer's been a doubles machine, I think, so far. I just glanced at the numbers, but that's who they'll see in this series. Very important, I think you would agree, for the Reds to come out with a series win to wrap up this trip and maybe more.
And talk about the importance of playing clean baseball. Like, you lose in Colorado when you don't play clean baseball because that outfield is so big, because strikes and throwing strikes carries extra weight in Coors Field because of the way the ball spins, and a bunch of other under the radar stuff. You got to play clean baseball, and that's the only way the Rockies can beat you is if you don't. And I do think the Rockies are the worst team in baseball, and the Reds have got to take care of business.
We'll see you after that series. In the meantime, check us out on YouTube so you can see Chaz in his shirt and his haircut that he's had his entire life.
My haircut is tomorrow, actually. I'm getting a pre-draft haircut.
Oh, good. Good. What are you going to wear to the draft coverage?
Collared shirt.
Okay, good. You got that all lined up. Also, share with a friend, right?
Share with a friend. That's the best thing you can do.
This was a 2-for-1 on Power Stacks with the Reds and the most unique Bengals and NFL draft coverage I think we've ever seen.
You know what I love is now some listener, please be this listener if you're out here. Let's say the Bengals draft Peebles in the 3rd round and you're gonna say to your buddy, "He's like TJ Friedel." To me, that would be the most meaningful thing that any of you could possibly do.
I believe it's gonna happen. I believe it's gonna happen. Good show. Enjoy the draft, and we'll see you next time, Chaz.